Mr. Chairman, thank you again. The IRS 1099 issue that Chairman Durbin just talked about, as I understand, your budget request included $23.3 million and 82 full-time employees attributed to that healthcare law's provisions. In light of its repeal, the IRS's request is reduced by that $23.3 million and a change in the in the 82 full-time employees.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's dropped.
Good. That's correct answer.
We just saved some money.
And then what Chairman Durbin was talking about caused me to want to inquire about the security. You mentioned about the voluntary nature, the concern by Americans about information, the federal government having information about them. How secure of system do we have in place that protects taxpayer information from those who would want to either damage, harm the system, or steal the information for their own use?
It is very secure and locked down. I always tell everybody I was sworn in, I came back to the office, and the first briefing I had as IRS Commissioner was about protection of taxpayer data and data security. It's really built into the DNA of the IRS. You know, there's laws that prohibit any of our individual employees from sharing information about any individual taxpayer with anyone, and we prosecute aggressively when anything happens. From the just pure data security infrastructure, we've got extensive perimeter infrastructure around the web, and you know, we're continually monitoring that. We coordinate with all of the federal national security agencies around this to make sure our infrastructure is protected. And then internal security, we have logs, monitoring, lockdown. And one of the things that I committed, when I came in, is that any new technology we put online is going to have 100% lockdown data security. You have to make choices about what you're going to do, but we're never going to make a choice around data security. So we take this very seriously, and you know, we'll stay focused on it.
One of the reasons, I'll shift topics, but one of the reasons you would request more money and more personnel is the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Its constitutionality is being tested, and I assume ultimately will be decided by the United States Supreme Court. In light of whatever the uncertainty is, whatever the magnitude of that uncertainty is the IRS operating as if it is constitutional, going to be fully implemented? Is there a middle-of-the-road approach? I assume that you're not sitting there waiting for the constitutionality to be determined, but are you behaving any differently in the expenditure of money, the use of personnel, the focus of resources because of the constitutional challenge?
You know, our job is to administer the laws that are on the books, and there's lots of tax laws that are in different places in the courts. This is obviously a high-profile one. You know, just to be clear, our responsibility regarding the Affordable Care Act is to administer traditional tax laws, refundable credits, and collection of some of the revenues for that. And we are implementing the law on the books, and so no, we're in the process of implementing the Affordable Care Act. Obviously, if something happens and changes, we'll move similar to the 1099 issue that was in there. Is we would have been prepared to implement that. We had started to do a small amount of planning. It got repealed. We stopped. But we move forward with the laws that are on the books.
Time frame wise for implementation of ACA, what happens incrementally between now and 2014 or its full implementation? You have to go through a series of additional use of resources, personnel, and tax collections and enforcement?
Yeah, so you can really break up the work that we're going to need to do on the Affordable Care Act into the technology infrastructure, largely around the refundable credits and connecting with the state exchanges. And that's our biggest lift between now and 2014. That's technology and operations is 82% of the request in the 2012 budget. It's building the infrastructure to hook up with all the state exchanges, so when people are registering, they can find out their eligibility for tax credits, can sign up for tax credits, and then we have the information flows and the money flows with the insurance companies to be paying those on a regular basis. And then there's some very bespoke tax law in the Affordable Care Act that we need to implement immediately. There's a lot of immediately effective provisions, such as, there's a tax on, an excise tax on tanning salons, which was implemented, and right now we're doing outreach to them. There's 25,000 who have never had an excise tax, and so we're doing outreach, education, and then we'll have a compliance program. There's a credit for small businesses to help them buy insurance, help them buy insurance for their employees. There's a tax on branded pharmaceuticals, which right now we've sent out the initial bills to the branded pharmaceutical companies for that. They're verifying the data. It's actually based on government purchases. And so there's that kind of work, but that's a very small amount of the work. So between now and 2014, there'll be the immediately implemented tax provisions and the work that has to happen there. But the big lift is building the technology infrastructure to be ready to interface with the state exchanges and the insurance companies around the $400 billion of refundable credits.
And that's required in 2014?
Yeah, the open enrollment will happen sometime in 2013. And if you scope a systems build, you basically need to lock down requirements, then do your build, and then do your testing. So there's a huge lift in 2012 around requirements and build, because by 2013 you should be testing the systems.
Mr. Chairman, I think perhaps my last question is related to Nina Olson, the National Taxpayer Advocate's testimony. And she raised a couple of issues for me, talking about really customer service, taxpayer service. For IRS's FY 210 management discussion analysis included GAO's financial audit of the IRS. Collection related to enforcement activities totaled $57.6 billion, a 34% increase over 2004. By contrast, noted that the IRS answered 74% of all calls from taxpayers seeking to speak with a telephone assistant in 10, as compared to 87% in 04. So a decline of 13 percentage points, or 15%. So less access to the person, the live person on the phone, I think, is the point that's being made here. And then also this sentence that the backlog of taxpayer correspondence in the tax adjustments inventory has jumped by 76%. The percentage of uncontrolled correspondence received, I don't know exactly what the word uncontrolled means, but it's in quotes, uncontrolled correspondence received but not yet entered into the IRS computer system has increased by 134%. And the percentage of taxpayer correspondence classified as overage, again in quotes, has increased by 135%. What are we being told, and what does that mean?
Sure. As I mentioned at the beginning, I take very seriously that the vast majority of Americans are wrestling with a very complex tax code. Their interaction with us every year is file a return and get a refund. And that's the last they hear of us. And I think about it and I talk about it internally at the IRS as we're a big financial service operation. And so we need to answer the phones, have web that works, have process paper, do all the things that you need to do to serve the American people. The reality is we are right now operating with about 1,200 less people than we were at the end of last fiscal year, because we were under CR and our budget was slightly reduced. We have allocations to taxpayer service and we have allocations to enforcement, and those enforcement allocations have a ring around them because they have a direct revenue producing effect. The reality in my mind is our taxpayer service operations also bring in revenue. When we answer a tax law question, help them get it right, e-file, build computer systems so that we can do matching, all of those accounts actually help get the $2.3 trillion in revenue. And we're trying to get a mix. The phone calls, I think we're actually doing okay. We actually need more people to answer more phone calls, and that's, we didn't get the request last year for 2011, and we've put the request in again for 2012, which will bring up that level of service. I would point out, because we use this thing we call the level of service, that is not, is a taxpayer satisfied with the service? We actually have a 96% customer satisfaction rating on our phone calls. We've introduced a few things which has dropped our level of service, but we think increased satisfaction, like wait time. So if a taxpayer calls and hangs up, that counts as a negative. So that's not in the 74%. But we tell them it's a 12-minute wait, and you might want to call back, at a less busy time. Our paper inventory has been growing because we've had less people processing. We either put people on the phones or put people on paper. The way we tried to balance it is, during March and April, we try to make sure we answer all the phone calls we can. And so paper gets backed up. Then we catch up with paper as we go. This request asks for more customer service folks, because, this you got to just process. You need people to process it, open it up, look at it, make decisions about where it goes. Things fall out into error, and so that's gone down. I've always leaned in and said, around priorities, we want to make sure technology is the key, and we need to make sure we invest in technology. Phones and paper and the web, because we can move people off of paper and the phones if we can do more transactions on the web, have to be invested in. And frankly, though, the conversation that ends up happening with people who spend time with the budget is there's always a tendency to put money into enforcement. And so we really need, I think you're pointing out, and the taxpayer advocate's pointing out, we need to keep an eye on a balanced program. I think the president's budget is very balanced and will boost those numbers, and so we'll be serving people better. But make no mistake, about it. In tough budget times, there's going to be longer wait times. We're going to answer less phone calls. Paper is going to take longer.
Are there more inquiries over time? More taxpayers are calling asking for help, or less?
It spikes based on different kinds of provisions. We had a huge spike in 2008 when we sent out the stimulus checks to every American. People were, where's my stimulus check? Am I going to get one? Et cetera. And phone call volume spiked and our level of service plummeted. We've had kind of steady, and a lot of it depends on tax law, what's going to happen. If you look at our Affordable Care Act request, just back to what you were talking about, technology and service and making sure people understand how the rules work, what they're eligible for, is really the bulk of the request.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.